Hello and welcome to Sleepsmyth, your peaceful place to unwind, dream, and drift gently into sleep. Before we start our story tonight, let me help you settle in with a simple, calming breath like a gentle lullaby for your body and mind. So, find a cozy spot, maybe snuggle under your blanket, and softly close your eyes. Now, breathing quietly through your nose for 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold that breath softly for 7 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And now, slowly exhale through your mouth for 8 seconds, letting all the tension melt away. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's do that again. Nice and easy. Breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. One last time, just like a soft whisper, breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Feel your body getting lighter, your mind quiet, as if you're being tucked gently into a calm, warm bed. Thank you for sharing this moment with Sleepsmyth. Now, relax completely and let the story carry you into a peaceful, restful sleep. Let's begin.
Up where the silence stretches into infinity, where night folds gently over the shoulders of the world, the sky awakens, not with sound, but with memory. It remembers the spirits who dance across the northern sky, ribbons of color curling and twisting like living breath. Ancestors long gone, yet here, shimmering, guiding, protecting, reminding all who wander beneath them. Each swirl of green, violet, and gold, a story of love, of longing, of life. A quiet, luminous chorus, lifting the frozen nights into something sacred. It remembers Ra, the sun who rises in golden defiance, a fire born from the heart of the cosmos, chasing away the dark. His warmth brushes the earth, painting rivers and deserts with light. Every dawn, a story of courage. Every sunset, a whispered promise that even when darkness comes, the light will always return. And it remembers Na-gah, a mountain sheep who climbed the peaks where the air thins and time itself feels fragile, who leapt beyond the cliffs, beyond the clouds, beyond the reach of the earth, and became the North Star, steadfast, unwavering, eternal, watching silently over valleys, rivers, forests, and frozen plains. A quiet guardian, a single point of light, holding the world in its calm embrace. These are not just lights, not just ribbons, or flames, or points of brilliance. They are lives. Lives that dared, that dreamed, that loved, that leapt. They shimmer in the heavens, weaving a tapestry of courage, longing, and remembrance. Tonight, lift your eyes. Let the world soften beneath your gaze. Let the wind carry you upward and drift among the stars. Follow the luminous dance of the northern spirits. Feel Ross fire pulse across the horizon. Rest in the quiet guidance of Na-gah, steadfast in the dark. You are not beneath the stars tonight. You are within them. Their light flows through you. Their stories breathe with you. And for a moment, infinite, fragile, you are part of the cosmos itself. Aurora's luminous dance, spirits of the northern sky, a sky alive with ancestors, ribbons of light that guide, protect, and remind the living through the endless winter nights. The endless night. Long ago, in the farthest reaches of the world, winter ruled with a silence that stretched for months. The sun would vanish beyond the horizon, leaving the land in darkness so deep that even the stars seemed cold and distant. The ice groaned beneath the weight of the snow, and the wind swept across the frozen plains, tearing at furs and rattling the walls of snow houses. Life persisted, but the cold pressed on hearts and bones alike, and the people learned to move with caution and patience. Children huddled close to the fire, their small hands reaching for warmth that barely touched their fingers. Hunters traced the faintest cracks in the ice, listening for the whisper of seals beneath the frozen sea. Elders spoke little, their eyes reflecting the long nights, teaching patience with quiet nods and measured breaths. Even the dogs pressed their bodies low, sensing the weight of the dark above. Then one night, the sky shifted. At first, a faint glow appeared at the edge of the horizon, pale and unsteady. The people stepped outside, drawing cloaks tight against the wind, squinting through the darkness. The glow strengthened, stretching across the heavens in ribbons of light. It shimmered and moved, twisting like smoke carried by a gentle breeze. Green flowed first, bright and strange against the black, followed by violet, soft and melancholy. The colors swirled together, bending and rippling, reflecting on the ice below like fire upon water. The children gasped and clutched their mothers. The hunters' eyes narrowed in awe, and even the elders leaned forward as if trying to understand what the heavens were showing them. Then came the sound, faint but unmistakable. It was laughter, soft and playful, carried by the wind, rising and falling like a melody without end. Some swore they heard voices long gone, whispering names they recognized. Others felt a rhythm in the air, a heartbeat that seemed to match their own. The people trembled, caught between wonder and fear, for this was no ordinary display. The lights moved with intention, not randomly, as though guided by unseen hands. They twisted, leapt, and shimmered, painting the night with life. The people understood that something greater than themselves had revealed itself, and they watched in silence, their hearts lifted and heavy at once. In that endless night, the world had changed. The darkness was no longer empty. The sky was alive, and the question lingered in every mind. What were these lights, and why had they come? The sky awakens. The next night, the people could not sleep. Even the youngest stirred beneath furs, drawn to the edge of their shelters by a feeling they could not name. Outside, the air was sharp and biting, carrying the scent of frozen sea and snow, but the glow of the sky called to them. They stepped onto the ice, boots crunching, and lifted their faces toward the heavens. The ribbons of light had returned, brighter now, stretching from one horizon to the other like rivers of living color. Green, violet, and hints of crimson flowed together, weaving across the sky in endless motion. The people could not look away. It seemed the lights moved with purpose, bending and folding, pulsing as if the sky itself breathed. Some children reached out, pointing with wonder, voices hushed and trembling. The hunters whispered to one another, uncertain if the lights were blessing or warning. Even the elders, those who had seen many winters, stood still, their faces pale in the glow. None had ever witnessed such a spectacle, and yet something about it felt familiar, as though the sky had always held this secret. And then they heard it, the sound that seemed to rise from the very air itself. It was laughter, soft but certain, rising and falling with the glow. It carried a warmth, a strange comfort, yet also a tremor of power. Some said the voices were those of the ancestors, calling through the light to guide the living. Others felt a rhythm, a heartbeat beneath the ice, as if the world itself had awakened to play along. The lights shifted suddenly, rising higher, dipping lower, twisting like ribbons caught in a dance. The colors reflected upon the ice, painting the snow in green and violet shadows. The people felt themselves caught in the beauty and the strangeness at once. Their breath rose in clouds, fingers stiff from cold, hearts pounding as though matching the rhythm of the sky. And slowly, a realization came to them. The lights were not random. They had meaning. They were alive, moving with intent. They were not stars, not fire, not wind. They were something greater, something that belonged to the sky, yet to the people as well. Some hunters remembered stories from their elders, fragments of memory about fire in the sky. They whispered to one another, calling to mind the spirits who had once walked among the living. Perhaps the lights were them, returned, playful yet watchful. Perhaps the dead had found a home above, where they could move freely and speak without fear of the cold or of hunger. The children gasped again as the lights arced and swirled. The laughter carried nearer, more certain, and the people realized that the night, once so endless and heavy, had become a place of wonder. The sky was awake, the dead were present, and the living were part of the story unfolding above them. In that moment, the people felt a bond stretch between earth and sky, between life and the world beyond, and they understood that the Aurora was not simply light. It was a bridge, a guide, and a messenger, and though they did not yet know its full purpose, they knew it would never leave them. The spirits revealed. The night deepened, and the people stayed outside, unable to turn away from the moving lights above. The ribbons of green and violet swirled endlessly, stretching across the sky in patterns too deliberate to be mere chance. With every shift and flicker, the lights seemed to whisper secrets, carrying the echo of laughter and the faint murmur of voices long gone. Then, slowly, shapes began to form within the glow. Figures, tall and slender, appeared like silhouettes against the moving light. At first, the people thought their eyes were deceiving them, but the shapes moved with a grace no living creature possessed. They leapt and turned, stretched and folded, their motions fluid and unending. And then the truth became clear. These were not shadows or illusions. They were spirits. The people fell to their knees, hearts racing. The elders gasped, whispering that the ancestors had returned. Hunters tightened their grips on their spears, unsure if the spirits would bless them or carry them away. Children clutched at their mothers' sleeves, eyes wide with awe and fear. The dogs growled softly, low in their throats, sensing the presence of beings beyond the living world. The spirits moved as one, weaving through the sky in a dance that was both playful and solemn. Their forms glowed like embers in the night, soft yet unmistakable. They bent the colors around them, creating shapes and patterns that seemed to tell stories. A hunter recognized the outline of a seal he had once caught. A mother thought she saw her lost child running across the ice in the glow. And the people understood that the spirits remembered the lives they had lived. The elders spoke softly, explaining that the lights were guides, not just for the hunters on the ice, but for all who traveled the long nights. They are the ancestors, one whispered, returning to walk with us in the darkness. They carry wisdom, protection, and the knowledge that we are not alone. The children listened, eyes fixed on the sky, understanding in some deep, unspoken way that life and death were bound together in the dance above. The spirits began to move in patterns that seemed deliberate. They stretched across the horizon in arches, their glow reflecting on the ice below. Sometimes they rose, shooting like arrows toward the stars. Sometimes they swirled in tight spirals, as if marking a path for those on the ground. The people began to sense a rhythm in the lights, a pattern that guided them in the dark. Hunters could follow the trails of green to find safe paths across the frozen seas. Travelers could orient themselves when snowstorms erased all landmarks. And when despair weighed heavily, they could look up and see their loved ones watching over them. The people felt a mix of awe and gratitude. Never had the night sky seemed so alive. Never had they felt such a closeness to those who had passed from the earth. The lights were no longer distant, cold stars. They were familiar, protective, alive. They were the bridge between worlds, the reminder that the ancestors never truly left. And in that cold, endless night, the people realized the truth of what they were seeing. The Aurora was more than beauty. It was guidance, protection, and the living memory of those who had come before. The spirits were revealed, and the people understood that the sky itself had opened to them. Playful lights. As the night stretched on, the people began to notice the spirits behaving in ways that were more than solemn. The glow of the aurora shifted and darted, weaving around itself like ribbons of silk caught in an unseen breeze. It twisted and twirled, forming shapes that seemed to mimic the world below. The hunters watched, astonished, as the lights leaped like animals, chasing each other across the sky. The children laughed softly, pointing at the shapes. "Look, a fox," one whispered. "And a bird, see how it dives," another added. Even the elders could not help but smile, though their eyes remained wide with reverence. The spirits had become more than guides. They were companions, dancing with a joy that warmed the frozen land. Sometimes, the lights would reach low to the horizon, skimming just above the ice. Travelers who had been lost in the white darkness found themselves drawn forward, the colors forming a path to safety. Hunters following the Aurora discovered seals and fish hidden beneath the ice, as though the spirits were helping to feed them in the endless winter. The people began to speak of the lights not only with awe, but with gratitude, calling them guardians of the night. The spirits seemed aware of the observers below. They twirled and shimmered faster when children laughed, forming shapes that made the young ones squeal with delight. Sometimes they would pause, lingering in a single position, as if letting the people memorize the wonder before it changed. And then, with sudden motion, they would dart again, pulling ribbons of color across the sky in ways that seemed almost playful. Elders whispered that these spirits were more than memory. They were the souls of those who had loved the land, who had cherished the nights and skies in life, and who now returned to remind the living that joy could exist even in the darkest times. The hunters nodded, understanding that survival was not only about endurance, but also about recognizing beauty and hope in the harshest conditions. One particularly long night, the lights formed what appeared to be a great bridge stretching across the horizon. The people watched in wonder, understanding that this was no ordinary spectacle. The Aurora was teaching them, guiding them, reminding them of a connection that stretched beyond life and death. The ice beneath their feet seemed to glow faintly with the reflection, as if the world itself acknowledged the spirit's presence. And in the quiet moments between the movement and the sound, the people felt something shift inside. A calm settled over their hearts. The endless night did not feel quite so oppressive. The cold did not bite as sharply. And the Aurora's dance became a story in itself, one that would be remembered and retold for generations. The playful lights had arrived, and with them, the night no longer seemed lonely. Guiding ribbons. As the nights passed, the people began to notice that the Aurora's dance was not random. The lights moved with a deliberate rhythm, guiding travelers, hunters, and those who had lost their way across the frozen expanse. The green and violet ribbons arched over ice and snow, marking paths safe to follow, while crimson streaks signaled danger where cracks or hidden waters lay beneath the surface. Hunters who had once feared the long darkness began to rely on the lights. They would leave their villages at dusk, following the glowing bands across the plains. The Aurora seemed to anticipate their steps, twisting to reveal the safest paths. Sometimes the hunters would glance back at the village fires, only to see the lights stretch toward them, as if promising a safe return. Children began to learn from the dance as well. They would stare for hours at the shifting patterns, their young minds absorbing the way the lights moved. Soon, even the youngest could point out a safe trail, or notice when the spirits altered their glow to warn of approaching storms. It was as though the Aurora itself was teaching them the language of survival. Elders whispered that the spirits carried the wisdom of generations. Each movement, each flicker, was a message. They had watched over the people for centuries, guiding them when the sun hid too long. The aurora was not only beauty in the sky, it was a teacher, a guardian, and a reminder that life in the darkness was possible. On one particular night, the lights formed a sweeping arch directly above a frozen river. Hunters and travelers froze, watching as the glowing ribbons dipped toward a treacherous ice crack. A collective gasp rose from the group, for they understood that without the aurora's warning, disaster could have struck. The spirits hovered above, twisting and turning, almost as if they were smiling at the humans below. The children's laughter mingled with the wind as they mimicked the light's movements. Some tried to leap like the glowing figures, reaching toward the sky, their small fingers tracing invisible arcs in the cold air. The elders chuckled softly, realizing that the aurora was teaching not just survival, but joy. Even in the endless night, there was wonder, play, and guidance. As the night stretched onward, the people began to feel a profound connection to the spirits. The lights were no longer distant phenomena. They were companions, guides, and teachers. They moved with intent, communicating across the vast darkness, bridging the gap between the living and the unseen. The guiding ribbons had revealed themselves fully, and the people realized that the aurora's dance was not only light, it was the living presence of their ancestors, guiding each step, protecting each heart, and ensuring that the long night would never be without hope. The secrets of the northern sky. As the nights deepened, the people began to notice patterns within the aurora that they had not seen before. The lights no longer simply danced across the sky. They began to form shapes and signs that carried meaning. Hunters and elders alike watched in awe as arcs of green and violet stretched into symbols they could almost understand. The spirits were trying to communicate more than guidance. One evening, a hunter stood alone on the frozen ridge. He had been following the ribbons for hours, entranced by their movements. Suddenly, the lights coalesced above him, forming a circle of shimmering green that pulsed like a heartbeat. Within that circle, he could see faint outlines of figures. They were the spirits of those who had once walked the land, ancestors who had nurtured and protected the people through countless winters. He fell to his knees, feeling a warmth despite the freezing wind. The spirits' shapes shifted, stretching upward toward the stars, then arcing down to the ice. It was as if they were showing him the connection between the heavens and the earth. He realized that the aurora carried not just light, but memory. It carried the stories, wisdom, and love of all who had lived before. The elders confirmed what Ivalo sensed. The lights were the souls of the ancestors who had chosen to remain in the northern sky. They moved freely in the cold expanse, watching over the living, guiding travelers, teaching children, and reminding everyone that the night was not empty. The aurora was a bridge, a living memory of all that had come before. Children began to recognize familiar shapes in the lights. Sometimes they saw the outline of a great wolf that had roamed the forests long ago. Sometimes the image of a bird that had flown over frozen seas. Each night, the lights told a story, and those who watched learned the history of the land and their people. The hunters realized that the Aurora's guidance was also a test. It showed them paths that were safe and paths that were perilous. Those who paid attention, who respected the dance, would find safety and bounty. Those who ignored the lights risked misfortune, for the spirits were vigilant and deliberate in their movements. The people understood something profound. The northern sky was alive not only with color, but with purpose. Each streak of light carried meaning, each flicker was a word, and each spiral was a sentence in the long story of life, death, and survival. The Aurora was not just a spectacle, it was a teacher, a guardian, and a messenger. And so, under the endless night, the people learned to watch, to listen, and to understand. The spirits of the northern sky had revealed their secret. They were more than lights. They were the living memory and guidance of generations past. A sky that watches. As the nights grew longer, the people began to feel the Aurora's presence even when they were far from the ice fields. Travelers crossing frozen rivers and snow-laden plains would glance at the sky and see the familiar ribbons guiding them, bending and twisting to point the safest way forward. The light seemed to follow them, patient and watchful, as if the spirits cared not only for the whole village, but for each individual heart. One evening, a young girl wandered farther than she had intended. The wind cut through her furs, biting at her cheeks, and the snow swirled like a living cloud around her. Panic began to rise, but then she saw it, the Aurora above her, glowing softly, stretching in gentle arcs that formed a pathway across the ice. Her heart calmed, and she followed the lights, step by step, until she reached the safety of her village. The elders spoke quietly about what she had experienced. The spirits in the northern sky were not distant observers. They were attentive, personal in their guidance. Every movement of light had meaning, every pulse was communication. The people began to understand that the Aurora watched over them as individuals, knowing their fears, their hopes, and their needs. Children would run across the snow at night, following the lights, laughing and pointing as shapes formed above. Wolves and foxes in the forests were sometimes reflected in the green and violet streaks. The hunters noticed patterns that hinted at weather changes, or where the ice might be thin. The Aurora became a teacher of life itself, guiding and protecting in countless unseen ways. And sometimes, in the stillness of the night, the people could hear faint whispers within the ribbons of light. Soft voices, comforting and familiar, like those of lost family members. Some claimed the voices spoke words of encouragement, while others said it was simply the echo of presence, a reminder that they were never truly alone in the dark. The Aurora's movements became more intimate. Shapes would appear directly above children, twisting and folding in playful arcs that seemed to respond to their laughter. The hunters noticed that the paths suggested by the lights were safer and more abundant when followed with respect. Those who disregarded the dance sometimes found themselves met with challenges. It was clear the spirits demanded attention, reverence, and understanding. Through these nights, the people came to a quiet understanding. The Aurora was alive. It was not merely beauty in the sky. It was a companion, a guide, a guardian, and a messenger of love from generations past. The spirits had chosen to remain, to teach, to protect. And beneath the endless northern night, the people felt it in their hearts. The sky was watching, and they were never truly alone. The legacy of light. As the long winter nights continued, the people came to understand the full purpose of the aurora. The lights were more than playful spirits, more than guides across the ice. They were the living memory of those who had walked the world before. They carried the stories, the wisdom, and the love of generations, and they offered it freely to those who watched and listened. The elders told the villagers that the Aurora's dance was a gift, meant to remind the living that even in darkness, life endured. That even in the harshest cold, there was guidance, protection, and hope. The lights taught patience, courage, and attentiveness. Those who respected them were rewarded with knowledge and safety. Those who ignored them risked harm, for the spirits were neither careless nor blind. Children would lie on the snow, their eyes wide with wonder, following the ribbons of color as they twisted and turned. They imagined stories in every arc, learning lessons without even realizing it. Hunters studied the movements, reading the patterns for safe paths and bountiful hunting grounds. Families felt a comfort in the glow, a warmth that no fire could replicate. One particularly dark night, when the wind screamed across the frozen plains and the moon hid behind thick clouds, the aurora stretched across the sky in an endless ribbon. Its glow painted the ice below with green and violet shadows, reflecting the shapes of ancestors and spirits alike. The people stood together, holding hands, understanding that the sky itself had become a bridge between the living and the dead, between fear and courage, between darkness and light. The aurora's legacy was clear. It was a promise that even when the sun disappeared for months, the world would not be without guidance. That the ancestors, though gone from the earth, remained ever present in spirit. That life and memory were intertwined, flowing like ribbons across the northern sky. And so the people learned to watch, to listen, and to follow. The aurora was more than a spectacle of light. It was the heartbeat of the northern night. It was a teacher, a guardian, and a messenger. It carried the past into the present, guiding each step with purpose and care. From that night forward, no one feared the endless winter, for the lights above reminded them that even in darkness, they were watched, protected, and never truly alone. The spirits of the northern sky danced on, weaving their eternal story for every heart below. And the people understood that as long as the aurora moved across the heavens, hope would always endure. Ra's eternal voyage, keeper of the sun, a bark of gold upon the sky, a guardian who braves the shadows, a promise of light renewed forever. Dawn of Ra. Long ago, when the world was still young, the people of Egypt told of a god who carried the sun across the sky. His name was Ra, and his light was the breath of life itself. Without him, there would be no warmth, no harvest, no order to the turning of days. Each morning, they said, Ra rose from the eastern horizon in his golden bark, a shining vessel shaped not by human hands, but by the power of creation itself. The boat gleamed like fire upon the waters of the sky, its hull carved with symbols of power, its mast rising like a pillar between heaven and earth. In it stood Ra, crowned with the blazing disk of the sun, his eyes filled with the radiance of a god who saw all things. When he sailed forth, the world awakened. Darkness pulled back like a curtain, shadows shrinking into caves and hollows as the first rays of dawn spread over the land. The Nile caught the light first, its waters turning to molten gold as the river wound its way through the desert. Soon the fields shone, dew sparkling like tiny jewels, and the farmers lifted their heads to greet the warmth. Every creature stirred at Ra's arrival. Birds shook their wings and filled the air with cries, as though singing to the god above. Crops stretched upward, reaching for his blessing. Even the desert itself seemed to breathe under his gaze, the dunes glowing like waves of copper and bronze. To the people of Egypt, this was no simple sunrise. It was a divine promise, proof that Ra had survived the trials of the night and returned once more to bring life. They told their children that the sky itself was a river, endless and eternal, flowing from horizon to horizon. And Ra, in his bark of light, was the sailor who guided it each day. With every passing hour, his journey continued steadily above them, marking time, bringing order, and guarding the fragile balance of the world. For Ra was not just the sun, he was the keeper of Marat, the law of harmony, the order that kept chaos at bay. As his bark climbed higher into the sky, his power grew stronger. By midday, the sun burned brightest, filling the world with energy. It was the hour of Ra's triumph, when shadows were shortest and the strength of light was at its peak. But even then, the people remembered that his journey was never without danger. For just as the sun must rise, so too must it set, and beyond the western horizon, hidden from mortal eyes, a terrible enemy lay in wait. Still, as the morning brightened, none thought of that yet. The people gave thanks as Ra's light spread across their homes and temples. They lifted offerings of bread, beer, and incense, their prayers rising like smoke to meet the God above. To them, every golden ray was a gift, proof that the world still held order, and that life for another day would continue. And so the story begins, with Ra at the helm of his shining vessel, sailing across the river of the sky. The guardian of the sun, the giver of light, the eternal traveler who never rests. His voyage had begun anew, just as it always had, just as it always must. The bark across the sky. With dawn behind him, Ra's golden bark began its great passage across the heavens. It was not a hurried voyage, but a steady glide upon the endless river of sky, each moment measured, each movement woven into the rhythm of the world. The Egyptians believed that every breath of life, every beat of the heart, was linked to this journey, for as Ra moved above, so too did the world below flourish in his light. From the fields, farmers looked upward, shielding their eyes as the sun climbed higher. They whispered prayers of gratitude, knowing that without Ra's warmth, their crops would wither and the Nile's floods would turn from blessing to curse. Children played in the sand, chasing their shadows as the golden disk followed them from above. Travelers on dusty roads found courage in the constant light, for with the sun overhead, there was safety from the prowling beasts of night. Even the temples of stone, vast and towering, seemed to glow as though touched by divine hands. Priests stepped into the courtyards, lifting their arms to the sky, their chants rising in praise. They called Ra not only the sun, but the Father of creation, the Eye of heaven, the Keeper of time. For as he sailed, so did the hours pass, and without his presence, the days themselves would cease to exist. And yet, for all the beauty of the voyage, there was always an undertone of tension. The people knew that Ra's bark was not simply drifting. Each day's journey was part of an eternal struggle, for beyond the horizon lay the realm of danger. The sun's brightness was not merely light, but a shield, a weapon against the shadows that sought to swallow it. Still, in the heart of the day, that truth was easy to forget. As Ra reached his highest point, the land bloomed beneath him. The river sparkled like a ribbon of light, palm trees cast sharp shadows on the earth, and the hum of life filled every corner of Egypt. This was the hour of strength, the moment when Ra's presence was most undeniable. Mortals believed that even their own spirits were lifted by his power, their souls warmed, their courage renewed. Yet time does not linger, and neither could Ra. His bark moved ever onward, drawn toward the western horizon. And as the day stretched toward its close, a quiet unease stirred across the land. Shadows began to lengthen, stretching like fingers across the sand. The golden glow softened, deepening into amber and crimson, painting the sky with colors that spoke of beauty, but also of endings. The people watched this change with reverence. Some whispered their thanks for the day just past, while others prepared their altars, knowing night would soon fall. The priests reminded them that Ra's voyage was not yet finished. Ahead lay the descent, the most perilous part of the journey, when the god would leave the world of light and step into the realm of darkness. And in that realm, a great enemy waited. But for now, the bark still sailed across the heavens, carrying the promise of order, of warmth, of life. The journey of the sun was steady, unbroken, a golden thread stretched across the sky. The serpent stirs. As the golden bark drew nearer to the western horizon, the world below began to change. The air grew cooler, the long shadows of palm and temple stretched farther across the sands, and the brilliant blue sky softened into shades of copper and violet. To the people of Egypt, this was the quiet hour, the time when day began to fold itself into evening. Yet they knew too that beyond their sight, Ra was preparing for the most dangerous part of his voyage. For the sun did not simply vanish when it set. The Egyptians told that the sky was a river with two great bends, one above the earth, bright and golden, and one beneath it, hidden and dark. And when Ra's bark slipped past the edge of the horizon, it would sail down into the unseen waters of the underworld. And there, waiting in the depths, lay Apophis, the great serpent of chaos. They said the creature was vast beyond measure. His coils stretched endlessly, his body darker than night itself. His eyes burned with hatred, glowing red like embers smoldering in the void. And his mouth, wide gaping, lined with teeth sharper than stone, hungered for the sun, for Ra, for the very order of creation. For Apophis was not merely a beast. He was the shadow of all things, the embodiment of destruction, the enemy of harmony and life. Every night, when Ra's spark slipped beneath the horizon, Apophis would stir. The serpent twisted in the waters of the underworld, scales grinding against one another like the sound of distant thunder. His coils tightened, ready to strike, his jaws opening wider and wider. The priests taught that it was in this moment, as the world above grew dim, that all of existence trembled. For if Apophis devoured the sun, then light itself would be no more. But Ra was not alone on his journey. With him in the bark were loyal guardians, gods who had sworn to defend their king against the serpent's endless assault. Beside him stood Set, fierce and unyielding, holding a great spear forged in flame. Behind him rode Mehen, the protective serpent, coiling himself around the god to shield him from Apophis's strike. And at the bow of the vessel, the eye of Ra blazed with a light so piercing it could wound even the darkest of spirits. Still, no matter how many times the battle was fought, no matter how many nights Ra triumphed, Apophis always returned. The serpent could never truly die, for chaos cannot be destroyed. It can only be pushed back, beaten into the shadows, held at bay until it rises again. And so, as the sun dipped lower, and as the horizon burned with its final glow, the people prayed more fervently than ever. They lit fires along the riverbanks, torches that flickered like tiny stars against the growing dark. They chanted hymns in the temples, their voices rising in unison, carrying strength to their god as he prepared for the descent. Mothers told their children the story, urging them not to fear the night, for Ra was brave, and the gods who stood with him were mighty. And so, as the final rays of daylight slipped away, the bark of Ra descended into the underworld. The waters grew black. The air grew still. And somewhere in the depths, Apophis stirred, his body shifting, his great coils tightening, his gaze fixed upon the golden light that approached. The serpent was waiting. The descent into darkness. When the final light of the sun dipped below the western horizon, the world above grew dim. The people of Egypt watched as the sky deepened into shades of indigo, stars beginning to flicker into view. They knew, however, that what they saw was only half the story. For Ra's voyage had not ended. It had only entered its most perilous stretch. The golden bark now sailed down into the hidden waters of the Duat, the underworld where the living could not follow. The descent was said to be vast and mysterious. A river unlike the one that flowed through Egypt, its waters dark as obsidian, endless as eternity. The air was heavy, filled with whispers of unseen spirits, and the silence stretched so wide it seemed to press against the very hull of the bark. To mortals, night was a time of rest, but to Ra and his companions, it was the battlefield of forever. Inside the bark, the guardians stood ready. Set, god of storms, gripped his spear tightly, his eyes sharp, his body unyielding. Beside him Mehen, the coiled serpent of protection, circled the vessel in endless loops, his scales glowing faintly with divine light. At the stern, the goddess Ma'at herself was said to stand, her feather of truth resting upon her brow, for without her balance and order, even Ross' journey could falter. The bark glided deeper into the underworld, passing through shadowed gates guarded by strange, watchful spirits. Each hour of the night was marked by a different realm, and in each, Ross' presence brought a flicker of light to the darkness. The dead stirred as the bark passed, lifting their heads to the glow of the sun god, drawing strength and warmth even in death. For Ra was not only the protector of the living, his journey through the Duat also gave light to those who had crossed into the afterlife. But the deeper the bark traveled, the greater the danger grew. The waters rippled unnaturally, disturbed by unseen movements beneath. The silence was broken now and then by a hiss that echoed through the caverns of the underworld, a sound so vast and so terrible that even the gods in the bark stiffened. It was the voice of Apophis, stirring in the dark, his endless coils shifting against the river's current. Still, Ra did not falter. His form stood tall in the center of the vessel, the disk of the sun now veiled, glowing faintly like a hidden ember waiting to rise. His gaze was steady, for he had faced this path countless times before. Yet he knew, as did his guardians, that Apophis's hunger was endless. The serpent would strike again, just as he always did. Above the earth, mortals could not see this battle, but they felt its weight. For each moment of darkness was a reminder that the sun's return was never guaranteed. Fires were kept burning through the night. Chants rose steadily from temples and homes alike, their voices carried across the land like a net of faith meant to shield Ra in his trial. And so the bark sailed deeper, the waters of the Duat grew thicker, heavier, filled with the pressure of chaos pressing in from every side. The stars above the desert seemed to tremble, the air on earth stilled, as though all creation was holding its breath. Ra's descent was complete. He had entered the heart of darkness, where the serpent of chaos lay in wait. The battle in the depths. The bark glided through the thick, shadowed waters of the Duat. Its golden hull shimmered faintly, the only light in a sea of endless dark. Around it, silence stretched wide, but it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of something vast, watching, waiting. Then came the tremor, a deep, rolling vibration beneath the vessel, shaking the waters like the growl of a mountain shifting in its sleep. The guardians of Ra stiffened, their eyes scanning the dark currents. They knew this sign well. Apophis was near. The serpent rose slowly, his body coiling upward from the depths. His form was so massive that it seemed to have no beginning and no end. His scales shimmered with a sickly black-green sheen, reflecting the faint glow of the bark like broken glass. And then came his eyes, twin fires of red, blazing through the dark, filled with hatred as deep as the abyss itself. The waters churned as Apophis uncoiled, his mouth opening wide, a void lined with teeth that could pierce even the strongest stone. His hiss tore through the stillness, shaking the walls of the underworld, rattling the spirits that lingered in its shadows. It was the voice of chaos itself, the promise of unmaking. But Ra stood tall in the center of the bark, his light burning stronger as the serpent drew closer. Around him, the gods moved swiftly, their places in the battle long rehearsed. Set, the Stormbringer, lifted his spear, the fire at its tip glowing like lightning captured in bronze. With a roar that echoed against the cavern walls, he hurled it forward, striking the serpent across its scales. Sparks burst, and Apophis recoiled, thrashing violently, his coils striking the river with thunderous force. Mehen, the protective serpent, coiled tightly around the bark, his body forming a living shield. Each strike of Apophis's tail slammed against his glowing scales, but Mehen held fast, encircling Ra with unyielding strength. The vessel rocked, waves rising in the black waters, but it did not capsize. And at the bow, the eye of Ra blazed open, a brilliant light so fierce it cut through the darkness like a sword. It seared against Apophis's flesh, and the great serpent shrieked, twisting back, his body writhing as smoke rose from his wounded scales. Yet even wounded, he pressed forward, determined to swallow the sun whole. The clash raged on, hour by hour, as the bark struggled through the duet. Every strike of spear, every burst of divine flame, pushed Apophis back, yet never destroyed him. For chaos cannot be slain. It can only be driven into retreat. And so the gods fought tirelessly, their strength unbroken, their will unyielding. At last, with one final thrust, Set's spear pierced Apophis's jaw. The serpent howled, the sound reverberating through the endless halls of the underworld. His coils loosened, his massive body sinking back into the depths, hissing, thrashing, before finally retreating into the shadows once more. The waters stilled. The bark trembled, then steadied. The air grew quiet, the silence no longer oppressive, but heavy with relief. Ra's guardians lowered their weapons, their breaths deep, their forms steady but weary. For though they had won this night's battle, they knew Apophis would rise again with the coming of every dusk. Yet the light remained. Ra still stood, tall and shining, his golden form glowing softly in the dark. The bark pressed onward, cutting through the quiet waters, leaving behind the serpent's retreat. The sun had endured. The triumph of light. When the last echoes of Apophis's roar faded into the distance, silence returned to the river of the duet. This time, it was not the silence of menace, but of release. A stillness that washed over the bark like a balm, soothing, steadying. The waters calmed, rippling gently as though bowing to Ra's passage. The golden vessel drifted forward, no longer rocked by violent waves but gliding smoothly, its hull glowing faintly against the endless dark. Within its radiance, the guardians lowered their arms. Set, still gripping his spear, exhaled, his fierce eyes softening for the first time since dusk. Mehen loosened his coils slightly, though he remained vigilant, ever watchful. Ma'at stepped closer to the heart of the vessel, her feather gleaming with quiet brilliance, a reminder that balance had been restored once more. And at the center of it all stood Ra. His light, dimmed through the struggle, now brightened again. No longer the harsh blaze of midday, but a steady golden warmth, like a lantern carried through the night. It was the glow that promised renewal, the strength that guided not only the living above, but also the countless spirits below. For as the bark passed through the realms of the dead, the radiance of Ra touched them too. It was said that the blessed souls of the departed would gather along the riverbanks of the Duat, lifting their faces toward the bark. In Ra's glow, they felt comfort, as if touched by the sun once more. His light gave them hope, a reminder that even in death there was a path, a rhythm, a cycle that carried all things forward. And in the shadows, those who had strayed or faltered would shy away, unable to endure the brilliance of truth carried by the sun god's eternal voyage. Above the earth, mortals could not see these hidden moments, yet they sensed them. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the air felt cool and still, priests would whisper their hymns, women tending their hearths would murmur small prayers, travelers would look to the horizon in trust that Ra's light would return. Their faith, fragile yet unbroken, linked them to the divine struggle taking place beyond their sight. And so the triumph of light was not loud, nor filled with victory's roar. It was a quiet endurance, a steady glow that continued on when all else faltered. Each night, Apophis rose, and each night, Ra prevailed. His victory was not final, nor was it ever secure, but it was eternal in its constancy. The bark glided onward, leaving behind the shadowed caverns where chaos had risen. Ahead lay the eastern horizon, still hidden from the world of mortals, but drawing nearer with every moment. The faintest blush of promise lingered there, unseen but felt, the whisper of dawn waiting to return. And though the night was not yet done, all within the bark knew, the cycle would endure. The world would wake again to the golden blaze of morning. The return of the dawn. The river of the Duat narrowed, its shadows giving way to a faint shimmer ahead. The guardians lifted their gazes, and for the first time since nightfall, a glow brighter than the vessel itself flickered at the edge of the darkness. It was not yet the sun in its fullness, but the promise of it, a blush of gold breaking through the horizon's veil. Ra's form glowed brighter, his light expanding, filling the bark with warmth. His weary gaze softened, for this was the moment toward which his journey always turned. Each night he descended, each night he braved the jaws of Apophis, but each morning he rose once more. His strength was not his own alone, it was the faith of mortals, the order of Marat, the balance of the cosmos that lifted him forward. Above the earth, the first traces of dawn began to stir. Shadows thinned across the Nile surface, where crocodiles slipped into the cool waters. The desert winds shifted, carrying the scent of stone and sand, touched by the promise of warmth. Birds stirred in their nests, sensing what human eyes could not yet see. The world was readying itself for the return of light. In villages and cities, sleepers turned in their beds, dreams giving way to the subtle glow creeping at their windows. Priests of Ra rose before the first flame of the day appeared, standing at temple gates with arms outstretched. They whispered hymns in voices low and steady, as though their words themselves could help pull the sun upward through the sky. In every prayer, in every chant, they welcomed him back, just as they had the day before, and just as they would on the countless days yet to come. The bark pressed forward, its golden prow cutting through the last of the underworld's gloom. Mehen uncoiled, his watchful duty done, while Set lowered his spear, the storm within him quieted for now. Marat's feather gleamed in Ross' light, its brilliance signaling balance restored, truth upheld. The gods looked ahead, their faces soft, their eyes fixed upon the horizon, for the dawn was no longer a distant promise, but a certainty drawing near. At last, the eastern gates of the sky opened wide. A brilliance spilled forth, cascading across the waters like fire woven into silk. The bark of Ra crossed the threshold, and the world above was ignited. The golden orb lifted from the horizon, scattering the shadows, washing the land with warmth and radiance. Mortals awoke to fields painted in light, to rivers gleaming like bronze, to mountains crowned in rose and gold. They raised their eyes, some in reverence, some in quiet relief, but all in the shared knowledge that the sun had returned. Ra had kept his promise once more. And as the bark sailed upward into the morning sky, its golden sails catching the winds of eternity, the cycle was renewed. The night was behind, the day ahead, and the voyage would begin again when shadows lengthened once more. The eternal promise. So the sun rose once more. The bark of Ra, gleaming in its golden strength, sailed across the heavens, just as it had for countless ages. From the first dawn of creation to the day now unfolding, his journey has never faltered. Each rise a victory, each setting a promise kept. To the ancient Egyptians, this was more than light in the sky. It was the very rhythm of existence. When Ra's glow touched the earth, the Nile breathed life into the land, crops reached upward toward the warmth, and people found courage in the certainty of day. And when he descended, they did not despair, for they knew his voyage would continue, even unseen. They trusted that he would return, carrying with him the strength of order over chaos, the power of balance over shadow. The myth of Ra is not only the story of a god upon his bark. It is the story of resilience itself, of rising after each descent, of prevailing against the endless tide of darkness. It is the reminder that even when shadows stretch long and the night feels vast, light waits beyond the horizon, always, always returning. Perhaps that is why the Egyptians lifted their eyes each morning with gratitude, and each evening with reverence. They knew their lives were bound to this eternal rhythm. The journey of the sun was the journey of all things, a cycle of struggle and triumph, of departure and return, of endings that are never truly endings, but beginnings waiting to unfold. And so when you gaze at the sun today, you may feel it too, that ancient pulse of faith carried across millennia. The warmth on your skin is the same warmth that farmers once prayed for, that priests once praised, that wanderers once trusted as they crossed the desert sands. It is the light of Ra, eternal voyager, keeper of the sun, guardian against the shadows. The story of his voyage is not told to end, but to continue. For as surely as night will fall, dawn will come again, and Ra's golden bark will sail the heavens, guiding the world in its endless rhythm of light and life. And as you drift into rest, know this: even in the quiet of darkness, there is always a promise shining beyond it. A promise as old as time itself, the eternal voyage of the sun. Na-gah's steadfast watch, the North Star that never fades. The story of a mountain sheep who dared the summit, transformed into the North Star, steadfastly guiding travelers through darkness. Mountain of Spirits. Long ago, before the stars had been fully named, before humans looked to the sky for guidance, the mountains stretched endlessly across the land, jagged and ancient, their peaks piercing the clouds. Among these mountains roamed a remarkable creature named Na-gah, a mountain sheep unlike any other. His horns arched proudly toward the heavens, and his eyes reflected a glimmer of something eternal, a spark of courage that set him apart from the rest of his flock. Na-gah moved with a grace that seemed to defy the rocky cliffs. Each leap and step measured, each movement precise, yet filled with an energy that made him seem almost as if he were dancing with the winds themselves. The crags and ledges of the mountains were his playground and his challenge. And in every shadow, every whispering gust of wind, he felt the presence of the spirits that dwelled within the peaks. The air shimmered around him, carrying scents of pine, frost, and the cold mist of hidden valleys. Snow dusted the higher slopes, sparkling like 1,000 tiny stars fallen to earth. Na-gah paused to drink in the vastness of the sky above, the endless blue that would one day become the night when countless stars would emerge. His heart pulsed with the knowledge that the mountains were alive, that they observed and remembered everything, and that he was part of a story far greater than himself. From the cliffs, Na-gah could see the valleys stretch below him, rivers snaking through forests, frozen lakes reflecting the light of the sun, and distant peaks glowing with the gold of dawn. He felt both powerful and fragile in the enormity of the world. Yet he climbed higher and higher, sensing that some fate awaited him at the summit, a destiny that would stretch beyond the mountains, beyond the valleys, and even beyond the earth itself. Each step was a test, each ledge a question posed by the mountain. The winds whispered caution and encouragement, blending into a chorus of spirits that guided him. Snowflakes danced around him, carrying the secrets of ages past, sparkling in the pale sunlight. The cliffs seemed endless, yet Na-gah pressed on, driven by an instinct he could not name, a pull toward a peak that reached for the sky. As he ascended, he felt the air thin and the cold bite sharper. Yet the spirit within him did not waver. Every breath, every heartbeat, felt synchronized with the rhythm of the mountains. The rocks beneath his hooves held stories of countless years, of creatures who had risen and fallen, of storms that had swept across the peaks. And he, Na-gah, carried their courage and memory in his own pulse. At last, he reached the highest point, where earth met sky, where clouds swirled and kissed the rocks. The wind wrapped around him, cold and fierce, yet invigorating. It was a place where few had ventured, a place where only the bravest spirits could stand. Na-gah looked outward, the world sprawling beneath him, and he felt the pull of something beyond, a transformation waiting, a calling to rise beyond the mountains. A leap of faith. At the highest peak, where the air grew thin and the winds roared like the voices of unseen spirits, Na-gah paused. His hooves rested on stone that had weathered countless storms. The clouds swirled around him, silver and pale blue, drifting as if they too watched his every move. The world below seemed distant, quiet, and fragile. Yet at that moment, Na-gah felt an awareness beyond himself, a sense that he was standing on the threshold of something eternal. The mountain, ancient and patient, held him in its gaze. Every gust of wind, every flake of snow, carried the weight of centuries. Na-gah felt the presence of the spirits of the peaks, invisible yet tangible, their murmurs brushing against his ears like the soft sigh of 1,000 winters. They spoke of courage, of the trials faced by those who dared ascend, of the balance between life and the unknown. And then, in a sudden stillness, the mountain seemed to pause. The sky above deepened, a quieting of the elements, as though the world itself waited to witness what would happen next. Na-gah felt his pulse quicken. Something called to him from beyond, a force both gentle and immense, tugging at the core of his being. He felt no fear, only a profound sense of inevitability. With a single resolute motion, Na-gah leapt toward the edge of the peak. His body rose above the stone, above the clouds. Time seemed to stretch as if the mountains themselves held their breath. And in that moment, the spirits enveloped him, their whispers merging into a luminous embrace. His form shimmered, not as mere flesh, but as something that could endure beyond the earth, beyond the mountains, beyond the world itself. When the wind subsided and the clouds parted slightly, there remained a single brilliant point of light, fixed in the northern sky, unblinking, steady, eternal. That was Na-gah, transformed from a mountain sheep into the guiding star. The North Star, whose brilliance would pierce the darkness for all who wandered below. The mountains below whispered of his courage. The winds carried the echo of his leap across valleys and forests. And in every frozen plain, every shadowed path, the light of Na-gah became a silent guardian, a beacon of constancy, a reminder that even in the most vast and uncertain world, there was a fixed point of guidance. Thus, Na-gah's courage and spirit were forever preserved in the sky, a single star to watch over travelers, to endure through ages, to shine where no mountain could reach. And in that brilliance, the story of a mountain sheep who dared the summit lived on, beyond time, beyond fear, beyond the limits of the earth. A light for the wanderers. Once Na-gah took his place in the northern sky, the world below changed in subtle, enduring ways. Though the people of the valleys and plains had not yet learned his name, those who wandered beneath the vast heavens instinctively found reassurance in the star's steady glow. It shone silently, unwavering, over mountains, rivers, forests, and frozen lakes, a solitary witness to the quiet rhythms of the earth. Travelers, hunters, and those who journeyed through the wilderness began to notice the fixed point of light above. Even in the longest nights, when clouds hung low and winds tore through the valleys, the North Star remained steadfast. Its brilliance was not loud or commanding. It whispered guidance through the night, a gentle presence that allowed the lost to find their bearings. The story of Na-gah lived not in spoken words yet, but in the experience of being watched and guided, of knowing that the heavens held a guardian. The mountain sheep's leap and transformation became more than a tale of courage. It became a symbol of constancy. Across the forests and plains, every shadowed path, every frozen river, every wind-swept ridge was quietly illuminated by the North Star's light. Those who lifted their eyes toward it felt a calm assurance, a sense that the world, vast and wild, was not without order. A single point of brilliance anchored the sky, offering safety and direction to anyone who dared to wander. In this way, Na-gah's spirit endured. The stars around him twinkled in harmony, yet none held the same stillness, the same quiet authority. The North Star became a reminder that even when everything else shifts, moves, or falters, some things remain eternal. The presence of Na-gah encouraged trust, perseverance, and careful attention to the world. For those who walked beneath the sky, the star became both guide and companion. And so, though the original tale of the Paiute people was brief, its meaning stretched across time. Na-gah's leap and transformation carried a message as enduring as the mountains themselves, that courage, steadfastness, and a single act of bravery could reach beyond the limits of earth, to shine forever in the heavens. And in that enduring light, all wanderers found comfort, a quiet, unwavering path to follow. The watchful eye. From the moment Na-gah took his place in the northern sky, he became a silent sentinel. His light stretched across the landscape, touching valleys, peaks, rivers, and forests. Even the smallest creatures beneath him, though unaware of his name or origin, felt the steadiness of his presence. There was comfort in that unwavering glow, a quiet order in a world that could be wild and unpredictable. Seasons passed, and the North Star remained constant. As the snows fell, blanketing the land in white, its light reflected on frozen surfaces. As the rivers swelled with spring melt, its brilliance mirrored in the rippling water. Travelers and wanderers, guided by instinct or by the stars themselves, found their bearings by its glow. Though the original legend does not describe human journeys, the star's role as a guiding light was inherent. Its very presence promised orientation and stability. Above, the sky moved in an endless, silent rhythm. Clouds drifted, the moon shifted phases, and other stars sparkled and danced. Yet Na-gah held his place, unblinking, unyielding, and eternal. He became the fixed point around which the heavens turned, a reference in the chaos of the night. And in his stillness, there was both reassurance and awe, the kind of awe that inspires respect, humility, and wonder. Every flicker of his light carried the memory of his bravery, the leap from mountain to sky, the courage that transformed him into something beyond ordinary life. And though the original Paiute myth is brief, one could imagine that in every direction his light reached, it conveyed a silent message. Steadfastness is power, courage leaves an imprint, and some acts can shine far longer than a single lifetime. Thus, Na-gah watched over the world quietly, invisibly, yet with impact. A single, guiding light that would endure across the ages. A celestial guardian whose presence required no words, no rituals, only observation. Only a lift of the eyes toward the north, a moment of stillness, and one could feel the comfort of his eternal watch. Light through darkness. As nights grew long and the world below plunged into shadow, Na-gah's presence became more than a point of light in the sky. It was a beacon, a steady pulse of reassurance in a realm of uncertainty. Though the original legend does not include human observers, the essence of the myth conveys guidance and hope. His brilliance pierced the darkness, cutting through the endless expanse of night. The mountains, cliffs, and valleys below shifted with the rhythm of seasons. Snowstorms could obscure paths, clouds could veil the heavens, yet the North Star endured. Its constancy reminded the world that no matter how fierce the night or how tangled the wilderness, there existed a fixed point to orient oneself by. A single, unwavering truth in a mutable world. The story of Na-gah's leap, though simple in origin, carried weight across the sky. The transformation into a star symbolized courage, endurance, and the transcendence of mortal limits. It was not merely light that shone, it was a story of overcoming, of steadfastness, and of the triumph of spirit over the uncertainty below. Even when other stars sparkled and moved in patterns that seemed erratic, Na-gah's glow never wavered. It became the reference point, the pivot around which the heavens rotated. The very sky seemed to acknowledge his presence, and in every glance toward the northern horizon, one could feel the quiet power of his courage immortalized in brilliance. And so, though the Paiute myth is brief, its meaning is eternal. Na-gah's leap and his steadfast placement in the northern sky symbolize more than a creature's transformation. They embody the principle that constancy, bravery, and courage become enduring guidance. In every dark hour, the light of Na-gah remains, watching, illuminating, and reminding the world of the power of a single act of bravery. Eternal presence. From the moment Na-gah leapt to the heavens, his place in the northern sky became permanent. Though the legend is brief, the implications of his transformation are vast. His light remains fixed, unchanging, eternal. A silent witness to the passage of time, to the rise and fall of seasons, and to the cycles of life that continue below. Across the rugged mountains and open plains, across frozen rivers and hidden valleys, his presence is constant. The wind shifts, the sun sets and rises, and storms come and go, yet Na-gah's glow endures. The North Star became the ultimate symbol of stability in a world of change. Its light does not move, does not waver, and does not demand attention. It simply exists, steady, eternal, and guiding. In the quiet of the night, one could imagine the pulse of his courage radiating outward. Though the legend does not describe interaction with humans, his transformation inherently communicates guidance and reassurance. A symbol that even in darkness, one can find orientation, that bravery leaves a mark beyond physical existence, that the spirit of the courageous can shine across time. The stars surrounding Na-gah sparkle and shift, yet none are fixed as he is. His brilliance anchors the sky. He becomes a reference not just for travelers, but for the imagination itself, a focal point that draws eyes upward and hearts toward contemplation of the cosmos. The legend implies that this single act, a leap of courage, a trust in destiny, can become immortalized in the heavens. Thus, Na-gah's eternal presence serves as a reminder that a single courageous act, when performed with resolve and purpose, transcends the limits of earthly existence. That steadfastness has power, that in the vastness of the world, there is a light that does not falter, a guiding force visible to all who seek direction. And so, night after night, century after century, the North Star endures, unwavering, eternal, and filled with the silent legacy of Na-gah's courage. Sky's silent guardian. From his place in the northern sky, Na-gah became the eternal observer of the world below. Though he no longer roamed the mountains, his spirit remained vigilant. Every night, his light cut through darkness, a fixed point in an ever-shifting sky. Though brief in its telling, the myth conveys a profound truth. Courage and steadfastness endure. The forests, rivers, and plains stretched beneath him, vast and untamed. The mountains rose and fell in rolling lines, snow-laden peaks glinting in the moonlight. Na-gah's glow reflected softly on frozen lakes, glimmered across icy plains, and shimmered through the veil of night clouds. His presence required no ceremony, no praise, only acknowledgement in the hearts of those who observed, consciously or not. Seasons turned, years became decades, and centuries flowed into millennia. Yet the North Star's brilliance never dimmed. It became a natural compass, a silent guide, a reference for all who looked upward. The story of Na-gah was simple: a mountain sheep who dared, who leapt, who embraced courage, and was rewarded with eternal vigilance. The silent guardianship implied in the myth reminds us that some acts transcend their immediate consequences. Na-gah's leap transformed him into a symbol of courage, of permanence, of guidance. His presence reassures travelers, whether human or animal, that amidst uncertainty and darkness there exists an anchor, a constant point to trust, to orient by, to rely upon. Even as other stars danced, shifted, and flickered in celestial motion, the North Star remained unmoving. Its stillness became its power, a steady eye watching over the earth. And in that unwavering light, the mountain sheep's courage became immortal. The myth, though brief, teaches that even small creatures, through bravery and resolve, can leave a lasting impact, a permanent mark upon the universe itself. North Star's legacy. From the moment Na-gah became the North Star, his presence in the sky carried an eternal message. A single point of light, unwavering and steady, spanning the vastness of the heavens. The legend may be simple, yet its meaning reaches across time. It speaks of courage, perseverance, and the quiet power of steadfastness. Below him, the mountains, valleys, rivers, and forests stretched endlessly. Seasons changed, snow melted into spring waters, leaves turned with the cycle of the year, and creatures lived their lives beneath the unchanging glow. And still, the North Star shone, silent and unwavering. Its brilliance a guide to those who wandered, a reference to the heavens themselves, and a reminder that some acts leave a mark far greater than the moment. Na-gah's leap had transformed him into something beyond the ordinary. Beyond the mountains he once roamed, beyond the fleeting lives of mortal creatures. He became a symbol of courage that transcends form, a beacon whose light reaches across the ages, offering reassurance that even in darkness there is a constant, a place to look, to orient, to trust. Though the original Paiute myth is brief, the North Star carries its story nightly. Its brilliance embodies the lessons of Na-gah, that courage matters, that steadfastness matters, that some acts of bravery echo into eternity. Every night, the star casts its light upon the world, unblinking, offering a silent guide, a quiet presence, a witness to the ongoing rhythm of life below. And so the North Star endures, a lasting reminder that the world is vast, that darkness may fall, yet there exists a light that never falters. Na-gah's courage lives on in the sky eternal, guiding all who lift their eyes toward the north, reminding the world that even the smallest creature, by an act of courage, can touch eternity.